Hey everyone, welcome to True Crime Unchained. My name's Tim. So I've always been obsessed with serial killers and true crime and wrongful convictions. And so I figured, what the hell, let's do a true crime podcast. I've always wanted to, and it's just something I'm really interested in. So let's give it a go. So I'm a Florida native,
Hey, every
and I want to mostly concentrate on my home state of Florida, which, as you know, will give me pretty much endless content. So, if you've ever met me, it was probably a short amount of time before I started talking about some serial killer or true crime case. So I'm pretty sure this is the time for me to do it. So today we're going to talk about one of the creepiest cases, and it's right here in my own backyard. We're going to take it back to Southwest Florida in the mid 90s. This is the story of Daniel Conahan, who has become known as the Hog Trail Killer. He was convicted of one murder, but investigators think he might be tied to a dozen or more. And yes, some of these dump sites were really close to where he lived in Punta Gorda. So come on, let's walk down that hog trail. So it starts in February 1994. Two hog hunters are out in the woods north of Port Charlotte off Biscayne Boulevard, and they find a badly decomposed body. So this guy's been out there a while. There's rope marks on his wrists and on his neck, and his genitals were surgically removed. They couldn't identify him right away. He was called John Doe number one for years. And it turns out in 2021, through DNA and genealogy, they ID'd him as Jerry Lombard, a 27-year-old drifter from Massachusetts who disappeared around 1991. So now, more bodies start turning up in similar remote spots, places that the locals call the hog trails. Now, they call these the hog trails because wild boars root around there, creating like these narrow paths through the thick palmetto bushes and the scrubs. So they call them the hog trails. In early 1996, a family dog brings home a skull in Northport. March 1996, another body, William Malaragno, stabbed, mutilated, and posed almost like a crucifixion against a tree. April 1996, two more. Kenneth Lee Smith, dismembered and his body scattered, and Richard Allen Montgomery, 21, strangled, raped, genitals removed, wrapped in carpet padding. Montgomery had told his family he was meeting a guy named Dan who offered money for photos. So the pattern's pretty clear. Young white men, often transient, gay men, or just guys down on their luck, hanging around US 41 from Fort Myers up to Northport and Punta Gorda. They'd get approached with an offer, $100 to $200, to pose nude for bondage photos out in the woods. And then once out there, they get tied to trees, they're sexually assaulted, strangled using rope, and then mutilated. And sometimes there were other cuts, not just to the genitals, but he would cut their torsos and their feet and things like that. But there was no DNA left behind. And even if it had been, DNA was kind of in its infancy then, so they couldn't have done much with it either way, although it could probably help now. So Conahan lived in Punta Gorda with his parents at the time. He was a licensed practical nurse. He was described as a quiet guy, but he'd been discharged from the Navy like years earlier because of solicitation of male prostitutes and fighting. So his house was only a few miles from several of those discovery sites. Port Charlotte spots like Biscayne and Quesada were 5 to 10 miles away. Northport was even closer, and he drove around the area a lot, just picking dudes up. So what really cracked it open was a survivor. In July 1994, A handyman named Stanley Burden met Conahan in Fort Myers. Conahan offered $150 for photos. Sound familiar? He drove him to a wooded spot near where the other Fort Myers remains would later be found. He tied him to a tree, sexually assaulted him, and then tried to strangle him with a rope around his neck. So he played dead, and Conahan left after being scared off when a truck passed nearby. It scared him off. So Burden was able to get free. He went to the Punta Gorda police with rope burns and a description. They didn't have enough to arrest him then, but Burden later picked him out of a photo lineup. So then in 1995, there's another close call. David Payton, who was in jail later and tipped police off, Conahan picked him up and his car got stuck. That's when Payton looked in the back and saw knives, rope, and tarp and gloves in a bag. So while a passerby gets out to help with the car, as soon as it gets unstuck, this Payton guy jumps in the driver's seat and just hauls ass. So then Conahan reports his car stolen and Payton got arrested. But his story later helped convict Conahan. I mean, just imagine calling the cops on the guy who stole your car because you were going to murder him in the freaking woods. Crazy. So by mid-1996, with bodies piling up, police put Conahan under surveillance for 50 straight days. Helicopters were dispatched. They had undercover guys posing as like prostitutes in the woods. And he actually approached one of them for bondage photos right near some of the actual crime scenes where these other bodies were found. So they ended up searching his place, his house. They found rope, cameras, stained clothes, fibers from his car matched scenes, and paint chips from his dad's vehicle were in Montgomery's actual pubic hair. So he gets arrested on July 3rd, 1996, first for Burden's attempted murder, then in 97 charged with Montgomery's kidnapping. In a bench trial in 99, the judge found him guilty of first-degree premeditated murder and kidnapping. After 25 minutes of deliberation, the jury recommended the death penalty. The judge sentenced him December 10th, 1999. He's been on death row ever since, and he's still there today. But he has an appeal coming up in 2026, and he has claimed his innocence this entire time. The story doesn't stop with his arrest. In March 2007, a surveyor in a wooded area of Fort Myers, between 30 and 40 miles south, but along the same US 41 corridor where victims vanished, found 8 sets of skeletal remains. No clothes, no personal items, but the bones suggest strangulation, and the decomposition matched a mid-90s time frame. They called them the Fort Myers 8. 4 have been identified so far. They were also transients. They're sharing a similar profile with the other victims. Police have named Conahan the prime suspect because the patterns match so closely, and it's the same area that he used to cruise. Investigators think his total could be 13 or more. The Hog Trail victims plus these 8. The mutilations hid evidence. The transient lifestyles weren't always reported missing right away. I mean, was he active earlier in Fort Myers before moving north, or is there more to it? I mean, we might never know for sure, but as of now, Conahan is sitting on death row at Union Correctional. 4 of the Fort Myers 8 remain unidentified, and I will show their forensic facial reconstruction. If you have any tips, call the Charlotte County Sheriff's Office at 941-743-1234. Rewards are still available. This is just like one of those cases that hits like so close to home. Conahan wasn't like some stranger from out of town. He was like here, just living an ordinary life while doing this in spots where people like hike and hunt. I'm in the woods all the time, and now I'll have to think about this case anytime I'm in a remote spot. Like, you never know what you might find in the good old Sunshine State. So that's the story of the Hog Trail murders and the Fort Myers 8. If you've got thoughts or tips on any unsolved cases around here, hit me up in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. Thanks for listening, and talk to you next time, guys.